Okay, thank you, Vijay. So welcome everybody. We're just very grateful with Samaniji's blessings to start this young adult forum. This is the growth from a forum that we had just for the JV Orlando that was run by the Youth for the Youth with ideas chosen by the youth, the young adults, the ideas or the concepts or issues that they had in their work or study or life that they felt important. Could it be in Black Lives Matters? Could be current issues, global warming, climate change. They would then connect with the local community and prepare a presentation, both with current world impact and where conflict or confusion arises. And with the summary's help, we'll extract from Agam's wisdom that from Mar Bhagwan and Kevali's that would guide us to apply that and see how it relates. So it's a very practical way of comparing or addressing our issues. And it's directed at that age. Of course, others are invited, particularly previous alumni from Gyanshala and other young adults also. So with that, I appreciate your attendance, and hopefully this will be the start of a whole new era for young adults JV across USA. And this will grow to a much more fruitful relationship across and far more proactive and almost changing our Jainism into a new, if you like, format that suits your age group well. So welcome everybody. I'll send it back to Samriji.
Thank you, Dr. Devendra Mehta, for introducing about the forum and its plan for the young adult. So now I would like to give some presentation on fasting in Jain tradition, how it is practiced from a spiritual point of view, what is the concept of fasting in Jain tradition. So I'm sharing my presentation first, and then I would request to Dr. Mehta to present, Vijay Mehta, to present the fasting from scientific point of view, what kind of scientific studies are going on regarding the fasting, and might be later on Dr. Sancheti will also join the panel. So fasting in Jain tradition. As we know that fasting is well known as a Jain practice, spiritual practice. So we know that meditation and penance are two main spiritual practices of Jain religion. Fasting is the part of penance. It is very common among all the Jains of all the traditions, and as a part of festivals also it is practiced. Most of the Jains fast at special times, such as birthdays and anniversaries, during festivals and on holidays. Paryushan is the most prominent festival in Jain tradition, as we know, and lasting 8 days in Shwetambar tradition and 10 days in Digambar tradition during the monsoon. The monsoon is a time for Jains to observe fast of the religious procedures. However, a Jain may fast at any time. Jain saints usually perform fasts every now and then. You can heard many types of fastings being observed by different monks and nuns in different traditions. And we find that this fast is very important for not only for health purpose, but it is very, very important from a spiritual point of view. So Jain saints usually perform fasting for their spiritual purifications. And we find that there are various types of fastings in Jain tradition, and they all are practiced for self-control as much as possible for an individual. What is the definition of fasting in Jain tradition? According to Jain text, abstaining from the pleasures of the five senses, such as taste, music, etc., and dwelling in the self with deep concentration by giving up all types of foods is fasting at least for 36 hours. You can fast this kind of fasting, do fasting, this kind of fasting. For the sake of strengthening the performance of daily meditation, one must undertake fasting twice each lunar fortnight. This is the definition which is given especially in the Digambar text, Purusharth Siddhyupaya. There is another definition which is given in the same text. You can see free from all routine activities and giving up attachment to own body, etc. One should commence fasting from midday prior to the day of fasting, the 8th and the 14th day of each lunar fortnight. So you can see that in Jain tradition, it is prescribed that everybody should do fasting at least once in a week, especially on the 8th day and the 14th day of the lunar month. Sorry. Okay. Now, what is the purpose? As we know that Jainism is a kind of spiritual tradition. Its focus is on spiritual purification, spiritual upliftment, spiritual evolution, and spiritual realizations, self-realization. So the purpose of fasting in Jain tradition can be is especially spiritual and not for physical benefit, though physical benefit is also gained through fasting. We can control many diseases by the practice of fasting. Instead of that, our purpose must be pure spiritual. So here it is said that the fasting is done in Jain tradition with the purpose of the purification of the soul. And that's why it is considered as a kind of penance in Jain religion. We can see that fasting is given too much importance in Jain code of conduct, especially the code of conduct which is prescribed for the monks and nuns and also for the lay followers. So there are 12 types of vows which are prescribed for a householder in the code of conduct of a layman in Jain tradition. And among the 12 types of vows, you will find that the 11th vow, which is known as Proshadopvas, and that is always practiced with full fasting without taking even water. So in this portion of fast, we find that this fasting is done especially on the 8th or 14th days of the lunar cycle, though at present people are not practicing regularly in that way, but it is supposed to do every after 1 week, especially on the 8th and 14th day of the lunar cycle. And in this particular fasting, we find that we give up everything, including all types of liquids, whether it is water or any other thing. So in Jain fasting, it is said that you cannot take anything other than water. But so far as the Poshadopvas is concerned, it is said that you should also give up water for full day and night, at least for 36 hours. You can see also that there are various types of fasting. I will talk about them in the next slides. But before, I would say that Sanlekhana is also one of the vow which is prescribed for the monks and nuns and also for the householders. So Sanlekhana is the last vow which is prescribed in the list of the ethical code of conducts for the householders. It is the 13th vow. And in this particular vow, one Sanlekhana is observed, especially by the Jain ascetics and laboratories at the end of their life by gradually reducing the intake of food and liquids. So this is done only in the end of life. The end of life may be because of some incurable disease or maybe some such moments of life in which someone gets a severe injury or accident and there is no hope of life. And in the aid of old age, when we find that the time is not no more, and in that moment we can observe this kind of sanlekhana, which is also done with full fasting. Now I would say that there are various type of fastings which have been prescribed in Jain scriptures. So the first fasting, which is said here, Chauyar Upavas, it means in this fasting, you have to give up all 4 types of food. So for the regular food and the food which is taken especially as spicy things or any kind of liquids, and those things which are used, which are taken just for making good smell in the mouth. All these 4 types of foods you should give up in this particular Chovihar Upavas. So far as the Tivihar Upavas is concerned, we can take just water, and that is also boiled water or the water which is processed. And that water is also permitted from the sunrise to sunset. So this fasting can also be done easily by all the people. At present, people are practicing this kind of fasting in which they are taking water. They are keeping fasting for 36 hours or 24 hours. Next is Ayambil. Ayambil is also one kind of fasting, you can say. In this particular practice, we give up every other things. Just we take one type of grain, which is also boiled without adding anything to it, and only boiled water. And that grain you can take only once in a day and not all the times. So you can see that this Ayambil is also very famous or very much practiced in Jain tradition. Nowadays, we are seeing that there is Oliji. People are doing fast Ayambils for 9 days. They are taking things without any spicy element or without adding any ghee or oil or sugar or any other things. Just a simple food they are taking. So that kind of Ayambil is being practiced in Jain tradition, especially in the idol worship tradition. In Therapan tradition, we take just one type of food and nothing, no other items. And though they are also, they may also be free of all these spicy elements or ingredients. Instead of that, they are not permitted. They can take only just one type of food, just once in a day, and all the rest of the time they have to be on water only, and that is also permitted from sunrise to sunset. So you can see that Ayambil is practiced with all these rules and regulations, that you cannot take any forms of spices like chili powder or turmeric powder or dhania jeera powder or cumin seeds or sugar or food stuffs like oil, ghee, or honey. Any form of dairy products like milk, curd, cheese, paneer are not permitted in Ayambil. Any forms of direct or processed dry fruits, or vegetables are also not permitted. Any form of beverage like tea or coffee, they are also not permitted. Sweet, sour, or spicy food is not permitted. Only basic food is permitted, which includes foodstuffs made from primary grains and pulses like wheat, rice, green gram, chickpea, urad, dal, etc. And food prepared using the flours of these grains and pulses, wheat flour, rice flour, gram flour, or these are also permissible. The allowed spices include salt, black pepper, asafoetida powder, baking soda. Chapatis, rice, idli, and dosa are allowed if made without oil, ghee, butter, or any of the ingredients listed above. This fast is considered to be together than staying hungry, because tasteless food is also consumed to complete this fast. So you can see that these are the different rules and regulations which have been prescribed, especially for observing Ayambil. So this is what Ayambil. Now we would see that there are certain types of fastings which are done partly. We cannot say that they are fasting in true sense or exactly, but yeah, because we are giving up some food items or practicing limiting our dietary habits. So that is also a kind of a fasting, partial fasting. So ekasana is also considered in that way. So having only one meal in a day, biasan, in which you can take two meals in a day. Chovihar, no food or water after sunset until at least Naukarsi next day. Naukarsi means after rising, 48 minutes after rising the sun, you can start taking anything. Before, you are not permitted from previous sunset to this period. Many Jains practice this daily. Many Jains leave food or water before fortnight, 48 minutes of sunset. TBR, no food after sunset until at least Naukasi next day. Water is permitted until midnight. And Dubihar, no food after sunset until at least Naukasi next day. Water, milk, and medicine are permitted. People who are ill usually practice this one. There is partial fasting, which is known as Unodari or Unodar. So in this particular practice, we take very less items in our food than what we desire, or to simply avoid hunger. There is vritti shakship. It means limiting the number of items which we are taking in our food. Ras parityag, it is a kind of vegan practice in Jain tradition, though concept of vegan in Jainism is very, very vast in comparison to the vegan practice of today. So we say ras parityag. In this particular practice of fasting, we give up all the favorite foods, especially all the milk products, all the ghee products, all the oil products, and also honey, etc. So you can see that the Jain concept of this ras parityag is very wider in comparison to the vegan practice of today. We can also do long fastings like athai, no food for constant 8 days, only boiled water or processed water. So this kind of practice is also going on in all traditions. During the Paryushan, you can find that hundreds and hundreds of people do this kind of, or practice this kind of fasting for 8 days. Now, it means you can be on fasting for continuous 9 days, and you are just only on boiled water. So this kind of fasting is also done in hundreds of by hundreds of people during the Paryushan and other times. Sol Bahut, it is a no food for constant 16 days, only boiled water. So this kind of practice is also done by people during, especially in Chaturmas, rainy season time, or you can say during the monsoon when people celebrate Chaturmas in the presence of monks and nuns. Great fasts are fasts for months at a time. So you can see that Maskaman is also very much into practice in Jain tradition. Hundreds of people do Maskaman during the Chaturmas, rainy season. So to give up food and water or only food continuously for a whole month. So this kind of practice is very tough. Instead of that, we find that there are hundreds of such people who are performing or observing this kind of long fasting for a month. Vashitap is an upavas fasting for 36 hours on alternate days for 13 lunar months and 13 days continuously. In Vashitap, a person eats on alternate days between sunrise and sunset only. A person cannot eat on any two consecutive days for the period of fast, but can fast on 2 consecutive days. So you can see that this kind of practice is being also done by, it is also already done by Dr. Devendra Mehta. He has done 2 or 3 such kind of fast Vashitas. And there are certain other people also who are performing, who is doing this Vashita at present also. Viral Doshi is doing here in Orlando. And there are thousands of, hundreds of people in India who are performing Varshita every year. Some people are observing this Varshita for last 30 years, 40 years, some are from 50 years continuously. So this Varshita practice is also very in vogue. So with this, I have introduced about the concept of fasting from a spiritual point of view, from Jain perspective. If somebody has some questions, they can ask me. I think the questions will be taken when Q&A session would be there. So now I would request Dr. Vijay Sancheti for his presentation. We are proud of him because he has already been the alumni of JVV Pathshala. Now he's a doctor and gastrologist, I think. Is it? So I would request Dr. Vijay Mehta for sharing his scientific study about the fasting.
Vanami Somanji, thank you. All right, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm my name is Vijay. I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist. I'm one of the Orlando alum. My focus within PHGI or interest is certainly to do with nutrition, and so I thought it would be useful to look at where the science is in terms of fasting currently, especially because fasting is one within Jain traditions. And I think also because growing up, certainly I was exposed to many family members that were fasting, and some that did larger amounts of fast that we always thought to be quite extreme. Especially when discussing with others, it seemed to be quite extreme. So now in the medical field, fasting is being utilized more from a therapy standpoint. And so in particular, I thought it'd be interesting to see where is the research currently, and especially over the last decade. So looking at a few different definitions. So fasting is thought to be the restriction of food intake and restricting calories less than what the body may need. It's certainly grouped into more intermittent fasting, and so you may hear in media different types of this. So you may have alternate day fasting, which is what we consider with Versithup, time restricted feeding, similar to Ramadan, whole day fasting, of course, when we do upwasas, and then modified fasting, where you're eliminating certain foods or certain amount of calories. And then, of course, we're used to things like attais and beyond, where you're consecutively fasting for multiple days at a time with just water. So what happens when we are fasting? So a few things. So our body is actually quite smart. As we're fasting in the first couple days, it releases more glucose, more of the energy stores from various compartments in our body, but particularly the liver. And so the glucose will go up in various fasts. Though interestingly, as you continue fast over a period of time, the body actually seems to decrease that and regulate it. What does happen also is that the insulin that the body has to produce decreases, which makes sense because we're not consuming as much and not having to store it away. And so that decreases, which certainly from patients that may have diabetes may be helpful. Though what is also interesting is there is something called insulin resistance. So type 2 diabetes is thought to be an issue of insulin resistance, but this is actually a slightly different form. This is where the muscle doesn't take up as much glucose to actually utilize it for the brain, which is actually quite a smart mechanism within the body itself. In terms of the lipids, so for the most part, studies will show that your LDL cholesterol, which we think to be kind of the bad cholesterol, actually decreases, and that's certainly true of the more prolonged fast. Some of the studies where it's been more short-term, like 4 to 6 weeks, it's been a bit more variable, but certainly the longer ones have shown a decrease in the LDL cholesterol. And then going to protein, so certainly as we fast, our body does utilize some of our protein stores, especially in the first few days, though then after that it seems to stabilize. But there is that initial decrease in that total body protein. So as you'd expect from fasting, you would lose some weight. A lot of that is going to be water weight. Some of that is going to be your fat mass, so your previously stored energy forms. But there is some decrease in what we call your lean mass, so your muscle mass. Again, some of that is the water. Some of that is the previous carbohydrates that you have stored that your muscles will be using. But there is some breakdown in that muscle tissue in the first few days. The various studies have shown that some studies with some fasting has resulted in more sparing of muscle mass versus others. There's also been a couple previous studies where they've looked at doing exercise at the time of fasting, and that seems to decrease maybe a little bit the amount of lean muscle mass that is lost. The other aspect is your bone mass. So in some of the other short-term studies, there was previously concern that you would lose some bone density. Interestingly, in one of the studies where they had alternate day fasting for more than 6 months, similar to what we would have for Versatop, actually did not show any difference with regards to bone mass. And in another study where the restriction was a calorie restriction of about 25% of what the body needs over a prolonged period of time, showed loss of bone mass in the first year, but then seemed to stabilize between the 12 months to 2-year time frame. So other changes that we find is in particular with the hormones that go through the body. So if you can imagine when in the past people would be fasting or going through periods where they wouldn't have food, there would certainly be a stress response. And so we would see the cortisol increasing. But once the body switches its metabolism from using glucose and some of the proteins to what we call ketones, which is the breakdown products of the fatty acids, you actually start releasing some more endorphins, it appears. And so this can actually give a bit more of a euphoric sensation. That, and of course, with the serotonin as well. And so you can have elevated moods as well as decreased pain. This also results in something called brain-derived neurotrophic factors, which is certainly important in mood and as well as the function in terms of the brain. It helps in reorganizing some of your synapses and actually can give a bit more clarity of mind. And then when we're looking at something called autophagy, which can also result in anti-aging. So autophagy is essentially when the body is recycling many of its components, some of the older cells and organelles, and reutilizing it. Basically, we see that you have increased autophagy with particular types of fasting and certainly some of the more prolonged fasting. And this is thought to help with the aging process or decreasing the aging process. There's also decrease in a couple metabolites. One is called methionine, which is an amino acid, and the other one is triiodothyronine. And so decreases in this have been associated with anti-aging. Telomeres is basically the ends of DNA, and they help to prevent the misuse of DNA or miscopying of DNA. And so as that decreases over time, you have more issues with possible tumor formations, but aging in general. And so there's some thought that with fasting, you may decrease the breakdown or the decrease in telomeres, and that may help with that process. And when we look at the immune response, there seems to be some variation, but essentially what we're seeing is that the immune cells and some of the secondary cascades kind of go back to the bone marrow. And what's interesting about this is some of the more autoimmune diseases, things like MS, for example, have actually seen a potential benefit from fasting because of this type of mechanism. But at the same time, that you're not actually defenseless. Your actual innate immune system seems to pick up in particular, which is quite interesting. And then, of course, the psychological changes. So there are variations in negative and positive responses. As we kind of discussed, as you change in your metabolism, there's likely a difference from that too. And some of the studies, it may also be based on who is doing the studies and for what purpose, especially the long-term psychological changes. We see that initially there may be more agitation, anger, depression, but that seems to improve over time. In terms of micronutrients, so a couple of the long-term studies have shown decrease in what we call your hemoglobin and iron, though not to the point of having clinically significant iron deficiency anemia, which is also very important to see that your body is able to regulate many of its micronutrients, though I haven't seen any studies that really show some of the other ones, such as B12, zinc, vitamin D, for example. When looking at the prolonged fasting for 7 days and beyond, some of the similar features are seen to the intermittent fasting. I think one of the bigger differences that was probably seen as the lack of bone mass deterioration. So that was actually something that I thought was novel, and I was quite surprised about. But yeah, the kind of fasting between 7 to 10 days, at least based on a couple of studies, didn't seem to affect that. But many of the other changes were similar to what I mentioned previously. And then looking at how the body responds after fasting and then regaining back. So it does seem that any lean mass that was previously lost does seem to come back within a few days to a week after reconsumption of food. What was also interesting, comparing a few of the different intermittent fasting regimens, that the alternate day fasting seemed to have preserved more lean mass relative to the fat mass coming back. And so it seems to have a better response for long-term usage. So a few questions I was kind of thinking about as I was doing this was, I remember starting doing ecthermals and then upusses when I was younger. I was thinking, based on how we grow and develop, when would be reasonable times? When is it reasonable for children to kind of start with some of this? You often hear in India and other places as well where people are starting fasting sooner, and so I kind of thought in my mind as when would be a reasonable age, and I kind of wanted to bring that up for discussion as well, based on people's thoughts and what people have discussed previously with other friends and family. So I think Samir will go back to you, but if Dr. Sancheti is here, in which case we can go to his presentation and do the Q&A.
Dr. Sancheti, are you are mute, so you can open your speaker. Dr. Sancheti, you are mute. Okay, so I'm unmuting actually. Once. So Dr. Sancheti, you can unmute yourself, please. Dr. Vijay, could you please
Yes.
open unmute him?
I'm not sure which is his name.
Dr. Pratap Sancheti. Pratap Sancheti.
Here it is. I see.
Yeah. Now I was unmuted by the host, so I'm sorry I couldn't join earlier.
Thank you.
Now I am available. Can you make me the permit me to share my screen?
Yes, you are co-host. You can share.
Okay, I'll just do in a minute.
Yes.
Is it visible now?
No, it is not visible. Now it is visible. You can enlarge it.
No, enlarge will not be possible on my computer, but I'll continue with this one.
Okay.
Good morning at India, and good evening to you at Miami and other places in the USA. The issue of, I'll start my talk on this issue, the fasting, the soul and body detox, the theme of the today's meeting. As we know, our mind is what our body consumes. The issue of healthy eating and digestion has long been an important concern to the individuals and across the cultures. Among other practices, fasting, dieting, and vegetarianism are some of the techniques employed by the individuals and are encouraged by the society to increase longevity, health, and be away from the disease. Contrary to the popular beliefs, if done properly, fasting is not dangerous and unhealthy. In this presentation, I'll be discussing scientific basis of the fasting and some of the studies which have been done by us in the last 4 or 5 years. Dr. Vijay Mehta has done a wonderful job in explaining the scientific basis. So I'll be just skipping those portions. Next. Just a basic definition, we all are aware the food is essential, but the important part is it most misused part of our existence. While starvation is a forced one and dieting is a voluntary one, of taking the health benefit, and the starvation is because of the poverty and the famine. But fasting, which we are concerned today, is voluntarily not eating the food for varying length of time, be it for the religious or health or as a protest. We have seen many hunger strikes. We have seen many gyms or the yoga centers coming out with the fasting as an empire. But today we will be talking on the religious aspect of the purpose of Jain fasting is basically the spiritual, and health is a byproduct. It is full of tap, penance, and main aim is to shedding the karma through sacrifices, external austerities. As Mehta has already told us, increase mental clarity, abstinence from the pleasure, but an important point, social aspect. It brings a unifying, particularly during the pollution, if you do the fastings, it brings the society into the unity. And it also has got an element of empathy for those who are without basic needs. And for health people, it is nothing but a restriction of the calories and not more. Let us have a look into the two different, and I have summarized here. Spiritual element in the health related diet is almost negligible, whereas the health benefit in the religious practices is a byproduct and not the main thing. But important point in the next two, that in the religious practice or the religious fasting, there is no compulsion and there is no discomfort. If you have the discomfort, people say you are not doing the religious fasting. You must, in fact, word is you must enjoy it. So it requires a lot of preparation. Whereas a health related fasting, you can do even from today on or the tomorrow onward. So, and benefits, physical Mehta has already told, but I will be summarizing some of them. It decreases the body weight and the BMI, thereby reducing the non-communicable disease risk, particularly diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, cancer, and many more. Experimentally, it has been shown that the fasting has been associated with the stability of the telomeres, which is associated with the longevity. And the autophagy, in the last few present slides, he has already shown what autophagy, and it is associated with the decreased risk of the degenerative disease. But the spiritual and psychological benefits are much more than the Jain fasting. They are higher, you attain a higher level of consciousness, positive mental health with the decreased anxiety or depressions. What further important is the cognitive faculty increases and the cognitive decline, dementia, which comes with the aging, are slowed down. But what in our daily life we have got, that we have got a increased parasympathetic dominance compared to the sympathetic, which becomes down. So this is the one of the thing which takes our lifestyle in a better shape. I joined late, so I'm not sure, but whether this slide has been shown earlier. The Nobel Prize winner in 2016, Japanese scientist, has confirmed that autophagy is an important event, and it has given us a further boost to the Jain fasting. Sorry. So I'll be taking the two studies which have been done at our places. One is at the Ladno as part of the BMIRC project in 2015 and 16. And the title was Effect of Fasting on Human Health. We did this study at Kolkata and Jodhpur in India. We had 98 subjects who during Paryushan made different period of fastings. Mainly they were 3 to 4 days. Of course, the people who were doing 1 or 2 days, they were plenty, we are not included. But our thrust on the study was on the people who do either 8 or 10 days. Digambars, they do it for the 10 days. Swetambar mostly do it for the 8 days. And there were 23. And the 5 were people who did more than 10 days, ranging up to the 11 to 30 days. What we studied at the beginning of the experiment and what we repeated at the end, either 8 or 10 days or the 30th day, physically or anthropologically, we measure height, weight, body mass index was calculated, body fat distribution, pulse, and BP. And biochemically, we have analyzed almost all parameters routinely done in our labs: hemoglobin, blood sugar, blood urea nitrogen, cortisol, creatinine, lipid profile, protein and AG ratios, and they were the, and along with that, we did some psychological tests also. And this paper was published based on this study in 2020. And it was effect of Jain fasting on anthropometric, clinical, and biochemical parameters. It was part of our study. Myself, Dr. Prakash Sancheti, and Dr. M.K. Garg. We were involved in preparation of this paper, and we had this paper which has got appreciated. And I must remind you, this is the first study on the Jain fasting, though there are many things. And if you go across the literature, it is full of the studies on the religious fasting, but mainly it was on the Ramadan fastings and not on any other things. Let's give me one minute. Now, these are summary of our findings. Between the body weight, pulse, and other parameters, I have summarized here in this one. Increase or decrease in body weight and BMI. It was there up to 10 days. But when we analyzed in the people who did for the 30 days, it was not there further. So the initial weight reduction, which we all know in the health-related fastings, is mostly because of the loss of water. And the loss of body fat and the protein comes much later. And so the initial is, though it's not entirely due to the loss of water, because something is lost from the body also. So the body weight and the BMI are better up to the 10 days. Similarly, the systolic and diastolic BP also showed some changes, or because of, as I said, people become more parasympathetic. Thus, the major decrease in the systolic, which was main, and diastolic, they were decreased more significant in the diastolic one. However, the pulse rate has not changed much. We analyzed the biochemical parameters. This was the first point, the blood sugar level. It rised for first 10 days and later become stabilized. And we are not able to substantiate how did it happen so. But if you do the insulin, which we are planning in a later stage, it might give you the answer. And there was a improved lipid profile, particularly the high density cholesterol, and serum cholesterol also had a certain raised. It was raised, so it was not low as expected from in the beginning. And it is because it was the short-term studies. So initially the people are undergoing stress in the fasting, and later on they stabilize. So we may have get a more better chance if we do it in the later part. Our other study was published this year only on the Jain IM bill. What is IM bill? Perhaps many of you may not be knowing, or you, if you are conversant, let me just recapitulate some of the points which are there in IM bill. It's a special meal which is consist of the boiled grain, but the person doing IM bill is supposed to take only one type of boiled grains in the one day. In the second, he can either continue it or repeat it. But important point is that there is no spices, oil, ghee, milk, curd, vegetables, fruits. So they only take the boiled with the note, and this meal is taken once a day. And the boiled water is allowed to be consumed only during the daytime. Thus, if you to put it into the scientific words, it's an intermittent fasting. It's the person will be taking it for, I think, approximately 7 to 9 hours, not more than that. And but important point in this ambil is it is devoid of any taste. What we call it as a ras parityak. This is perhaps an important element in the uh, uh, external austerity or the renouncing the taste. Just a minute. The aim of our study, which was done at Vadodara, the Sumandeep University, and our aim was to find out safety and effect on plasma glucose, lipid profile, anthropological parameters, and the psychological testings. When we searched the literature, it was the first study on the Jain intermittent fasting, IMB intermittent fasting. We recruited 52 volunteers with the mean age of 52.7 years and almost equal, but little predominance amongst the ladies who did 9 days IMB fasting. Why 9 days? 9 days, it is the Navpad only. Nav means 9, Pad means steps. So 9 steps. And this is only twice a year, like Payushan is once a year. The Navpad only is for the twice a year. Important point in our participants, the 33 were diabetics, 10 had hypertension, 18 were obese, and 2 people had a heart disease. But all of them, this good point was, all of them tolerated the IMB fasting very well. The physical and psychological assessments were done. In psychological, we did the Hamilton Depression Rating Scales and the Quality of Life, QOL, on day 0 and day 9. Some of the tests we did on the 4th day also. And they are pulse, BP, BMI, I mentioned in the last one, but additional HbA1c, liver function test, thyroid stimulating hormone, electrolytes, and the ECGs. Our main findings were a significant decrease in the weight and BMI, up to the 1.3 kgs on the day 4 and 3.23 kgs on the day 9. So this was a significant reduction in the weight, but we have not done it after the IMB fasting has completed. We have not repeated at 1 month or the 4 months. There was a statistical significance. Compared to our earlier studies on the full fasting, there was a decrease in fasting glucose, diastolic BP, and the serum creatinine. There is a positive correlation or the less tendency to be on the depression side, significant one. But lipid profile has not changed much as we saw in the last studies. So we concluded that it is beneficial to do this type of intermittent fasting to have the metabolic, psychological, and holistic health, an important point with no health-related hazards. We further recommended that the more studies are needed on the disease levels. So can we, apart from having the upgrading of our health and the both physical and spiritual, can we have improvement in our disease pattern also? To summarize these 2 studies, they were the first studies on the Jain fastings and the IMB. And we have observed a reduction in the body weight, BMI, and blood sugar. There was a positive correlation with the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale. They are safe and do not have health-related hazards. But there is a lot of research scope, particularly with the fasting and the IMB may be difficult to do by most of the people, but a regular intermittent fasting, that is the eating as per the circadian rhythm, or what we have said, don't eat in the night, perhaps will be a better options for many diseases and the health related issues. And what this one, first is we have to search the literature and translate it into the scientific language to create a Jain diet model for the holistic health, rather than what we have been taught or we have been industrial propagation that Jain diet is a vegetarian and diet for the weak. Experimental studies have to be conducted to delineate anatomical, biochemical, and hormonal pathways of the fasting and their benefits. The benefits on the health, cognition, particularly the risk of dementia, mental health, common problem these days, physical fitness, and many diseases, particularly the non-communicable disease, they are very important. What we felt the biggest shortcoming of our study was that we limited it to the period of fasting. We didn't go beyond what happens to the people who have done the fasting today. What will happen to their health at 1 month, 1 year, or the 5 years? So the long-term sequel of Jain dietary practices are to be researched. I think this is the last slide of mine. Thank you very much for the patience listening. And if I say excited some inquisitiveness, my success in the presentation will be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sancheti, for discussing about the research outcome which we have conducted on fasting and IMBIL in India especially. And you have also shown that what kind of shortcomings are there in our research, so that the new generation or the participants can be the, what we say, instrumental for conducting those research, which is not covered yet. So this is now it is the floor for the Q&A. I would request all the youngsters who are joining this session, and it is especially meant for them. So they might have so many questions regarding all the presentations with all the speakers. So they are invited to ask any question they have. Anybody has any question? Okay, so just I have to unmute all the participants. Now, so it is unmuted. Anybody who has question, they can unmute and ask the question. Is someone asking?
I have a question. I can go ahead and ask if no one else does. Thanks for the excellent presentation, everyone. I'm curious if there's evidence on or like recommended methods for some of the time-restricted intermittent fasting approaches for people who do shift work. So shifting from days to evenings to overnights, and how that might impact your metabolic state.
So you are asking Vijay Mehta or Dr. Sancheti?
Both.
Okay, so anybody can answer. Dr. Sancheti. Vijay Mehta, you are requested
Just
first.
not Devendra Mehta.
Okay, Devendra Mehta is also there, but yeah, all the three
Yeah,
are
the change in shift work is definitely tough. I mean, so part of what's been thought from the intermittent fasting is really to compensate and follow with circadian rhythm. So one of the ones from time restricted feeding methods, they looked at kind of 6 hours versus 8 or 10 hours, and in particular the first 6 hours, so going from like 6 or 7 a.m. Onwards, seem to have better effect in terms of like cortisol, glucose relative to later on. So a lot of it is still based on circadian rhythm and trying to follow that. So yeah, the fact that you have shift work and you have overnights and stuff, you're kind of out of luck.
If we have to respond to your question, circadian rhythm research or our understanding has come from the it has come from the understanding that we are sleeping in the night and not but what has happened in our day-to-day life, the curtains and the artificial lights have changed this understanding. And to add to this one, the industrial or the occupational compulsions have further added to change in the circadian rhythms. So we have to make a compromise in the recommendations, which we were doing it earlier, based only on when you are totally sleeping in the night. So the recommendations are, even if you are compelled to take something in the night or later part of the day, you go in the small. Don't go for the bright. Go for the solace, or for anything which is the non-caloric or low-caloric, non-fatty, and go for and have a small amount and not in a big amount. So the big amount, let it be reserved for the period where your digestion is maximum. That's the one point. Second thing, perhaps I feel that seeing the changing circumstances, we must have a revision of our circadian rhythm understanding. That what is the circadian rhythm in the people who are either night watchmen or people doing in the work in the night shifts? What are the circadian rhythms in them, and what is the best time for them to have the meals? I think that's my answer.
Dr.
Thank
Devendra,
you.
would you like to say something?
Pramila?
No, I think that was well said. I think I learned also from Dr. Sanchetti. I think you're right. It's changing. The world is changing. We need to restudy the role of circadian rhythm. I think that certainly makes sense, and maybe in different phases of our life. So, with babies, children, mothers waking at night, feeding the babies, they're also out of rhythm. So perhaps nature is a way for us to work. We should understand it better.
So, any other question from the participants? They can unmute and ask the question.
Hi, I'm Rishabh. It was a really great presentation from all the speakers. I had a quick question on the lipid mechanism. So my mother was doing alternate fasting for like 3 to 4 months, and her cholesterol level improved drastically from those fasting. But since she has like now stopped doing those fasts, now her cholesterol levels has deteriorated significantly. So what do you suggest, like going forward, like to continue those like alternate fasting, or like how can be the long-term impact would be?
So Dr. Sanchetti wants to ask.
I'll respond to it.
Mhm.
If you go into the lipid metabolism, which is there with the fasting, the first it is the triglycerides. After the carbohydrate, it is a triglyceride which comes into the action, or they come into the, and on the fat, it is the ketone bodies which comes into the action to provide us the energies, particularly for the vital organs like the brain, eyes, and many more things. So cholesterol is I must say, it is not the source of major in energy. It is perhaps the byproduct of the fat metabolism. So the cholesterol reduction is more shown in most of the studies. What about the triglyceride? It has been seen that in majority of the studies, in the initial period, particularly, we have also seen 3 to 4 days, 5 days, the triglyceride level goes up, and later on they stabilizes and they come to the sub-therapeutic level or the sub-limit level. So the cholesterol level is known to reduce it. And if you continue on that diet or that pattern of diet, it will continue to be low. And you may require a less of medicine if you are hypercholesterol. I hope I have answered it.
I'm just to piggyback. I think one of the questions is kind of like after stopping any type of fasting, whether it's the alternate day fasting versus long-term fasting, what ends up happening to the cholesterol and lipids. And certainly that kind of still needs to be studied. But yeah, it does seem to rebound to where you were previously, but that's assuming no other dietary changes either. So the other parts from lipid metabolism would be, your higher cholesterols would be things from dairy products, especially from otherwise a vegetarian diet, of course. But the ways to also mitigate that is to have some of the foods that have more the polyunsaturated fats, and certainly more of the omega-3, which seems to help stabilize some of the lipid metabolism as well as the muscle function for it. So certainly some of those dietary modifications may help.
Okay, so Dr. Prakash Sancheti is also here. He is a brother of Dr. Pratap Sancheti. He is from Kolkata. Might be he has some question. Yes, you can ask.
Yes. Regarding my question is that Dr. Sancheti, here is the project work done under your care, but I seen the number of cases, the ultimate holistic outcome regarding the emotional, regarding your biochemically, you already told. What about the other mental factor point of view? That I want to ask question.
This is what I told in the limitations of our study, that we have not done it beyond the period of fasting. We have not gone beyond 8 or 10 days. That's the main issue. So it will all depend what was their outlook in the life, and including that for the diet. What were their outlooks? That will determine whether they will have a positive impact on the anxiety, depression, or the mental conflicts, violence. We are not very sure. They are likely to have, with all the understanding or the philosophy, they are likely to have benefits, but we must document it. I agree with you that we must follow these people at 1 month, 3 months, 12 months, and if possible, up to 5 years, and find out what happens to them. The people who are continuing to do the fastings repeatedly, or what were their dietary patterns, what were their philosophy in the life, and the people who are not following these, all making them as a control. So scientifically, the philosophically answer is yes. Scientifically, we have to investigate.
Right. Thank you.
And I would say that is the message that people need to carry, that we are beyond the phase where we just repeat what we believe. We have to get to a point where we prove, show. A lot of Western media looks at it from another game, and what they find may not relate to what we find, because we're doing it out of our different goals, right? We're not looking for body shape, image. We're doing it for spiritual benefit. And we, as Professor Jain said, we're supposed to be happy when we're doing it. So we're doing it out of joy. And I think that it's important that we have our publications out and our studies out to balance the Western, because sometimes we get very confused with their studies, and I think it'll distort the benefits that we see. So I totally agree with the Professor that we need to do into this work, and hopefully the audience on board today will help us do that. I think that one of these, the 18 to this 29ers have the strength, the power, ability, and in fact, technically quite diverse. And I think sometimes getting us all together, we can actually dig deep and establish the what are the truths are, good or bad, of our Jain approach. So I totally applaud.
Thank you.
Anybody else wants to ask anything?
I just wanted to add, I read the Dr. Mehta, Devendra's Mehta's study. If you start, or if you inculcate the habits in the early childhood, that are going to have a maximum benefit in the later age.
Any question? So I think that the questions have been done by the participants. If somebody has any question after session, they can also communicate through WhatsApp group, and all the panelists are ready to answer to your questions. And I would say that this session, we are thinking once in a month. So what would be the right day for all our youngsters, whether it is a 3rd week or a 4th week? What can be the right date for all the youngsters? Can anybody suggest from out of you? It can be set on 3rd, what we say, Saturday of the month. Can we fix that one?
Vandami, I think Sunday is good, Vandami. The same timing.
Okay. So it is 3rd Sunday, or what is the right?
think- I think I'm okay with any Sunday, but I think the last
Okay,
week of the month is also good. Yeah.
okay. So
Mhm.
that can be done. And all the youngsters, we know that you all are very much busy in your study, in your career, in your other things. So we do not want to bother by giving any assignment or any projects. But if you are interested, you can start reading on fasting from a spiritual point of view, from scientific point of view, from another angles. And you can see that what else you can find out in your research study, how you can present about fasting in the end of the what we say some sessions. So that will also be the just a formal assignment, informal assignment for the student, for the participants, especially for the youngsters. There are certain books which you can also see. There are several types of fastings which have been done by the monks and nuns from the very ancient time. And you can see the Antagar Dasha. This is a canon where you can find very long fasting which have been done by hundreds of people. And just by observing that kind of fasting, they liberated. So that kind of fasting you can read, especially in Antagar Sutra and in other texts. All these texts are available on Jain library. You can download freely. If you have time, you can just go through. And if you have any question, you can ask through WhatsApp group. So this is what I would like to say. And any other thing, Dr. Vijay, would you like to say to the participants?
So thank you, Dr. Shantali, for talking to us about your presentation, and thank you to all those that had questions. And yeah, if anyone else has other questions, yeah, definitely can share it in the group, and I guess to all the other as well, if there's any other method that you think would be beneficial for these talks and stuff, also to kind of present those ideas.
Dr. Devendra, would you like to say to the some?
Yeah, I
something?
want to thank everyone for joining. I feel that this is a great start. Mavi Jayanti, so auspicious start. I am totally thrilled that Professor Sancheti spent time all the way from India with expertise and his detailed research. He's a terrific advocate, researcher, scientist, physician, and certainly if anybody wants to look him up, look at the papers he's written. He's very humble. He's done a lot of work on Preksha Dhyan in elderly, many researches. Actually, he's at the forefront of our field. So I'd encourage you to look at his name, search his articles, and read them. You'll be quite amazed at how much work is going on in a purely academic way, as you'd expect in your college and you will be taught here. Professor Samani Chandrapraj, of course, has been teaching for 7 years at FIU. She's a professor on right. She sponsors, promotes all this research. She's actually been at London high positions to research, fund them, support them. She again is a great person. If you want to try some research ideas where you are in any field, she's also a great resource. So please dig deep into these resources. Our interest is to give you the wisdom and its, if you like, appropriate comparison use in the current era in your life. This is for you, by you, and we want to be able to dig deep into the ancient wisdom culture and not bypass that. This is your heritage, and we feel it's a very important part of your heritage. So dig deep. Next one in a month will be, I believe, by New Jersey, and also one after by Houston. So we're rotating to 3 centers. If anybody has ideas, interest, a topic they want to cover, then feel free to go on the WhatsApp group. Let us know. Let your center know. Let me know. This is a voluntary effort. When you have time, you can park it 6 months from now, 4 months from now. You can decide what you want to talk about, and we'll be happy to engage. This is really for you, by you. We had to support your education and how to apply Jainism in your current life as best you feel appropriate. So with that, I do appreciate everybody, and thank you for joining.
Okay, so the session which is being recorded, it will be available on WhatsApp group also and on website for the youths. They can again listen to this lecture and can have some ideas about fasting they can also share with their friends. So this is what I'm saying. And one thing more I would like to say, that you have to connect all your friends who are interested to learn about scientific studies and philosophical studies about the religious practices of Jain tradition. So with this, I would request Arnav Sacheti, for the vote of thanks. He is one of the youngsters who is joining this session, and I would like to say it to him that please give vote of thanks to all our participants and also the panelists.
Vandami Naman Sami Shamniji, Jai Jinendra, everyone. My name is Arnav. I'm a New Jersey Gyanshala alumni. First, I'd like to thank Shamniji for giving us her blessing as well as an enlightening talk today, introducing us what fasting in Jainism is. I'd also like to thank Dr. Vijay Mehta for presenting very interesting scientific research tidbits regarding different types of fasting and how it affects our body. Finally, I'd like to thank Dr. Sancheti for providing his insight and experience with his studies on Jain fasting. And I'd like to thank all the organizers for bringing us together today, and hope to see you all next month.
So thank you to all the panelists for joining this session and all the participants. I would like to see in bigger number in next session, all our youngsters. And any question, any suggestion, any topic of your interest, you can share with us with the WhatsApp group so that we can focus on those particular topics. Thank you very much. Happy Mahavir Janma Kalyana.
Vandana Swamiji.
Vandami Namasami Swamiji Kutagyasi.
Thank you.
Vandami Namasami Swamiji Mangal Part.
Okay. Chattari Mangalam, Arahanta Mangalam, Siddha Mangalam, Sahu Mangalam, Kevali Natto Dhammo Mangalam, Chattari Loguttama, Arahanta Loguttama, Siddha Loguttama, Sahu Loguttama, Kevali Pannatto Dhammo Loguttamo, Chattari Saranam Pavajami, Arhanti Saranam Pavajami, Siddhi Saranam Pavajami, Sahu Saranam Pavajami, Kevali Pannattang Dhammang Saranam Pavajami.
Vandami Swamiji.
Thank you.
बहुत अच्छा program रहा. It's nice to know something about the nutrition after the fasting and how it helps in our body and mentally as well.
Thank you very much. It was really very informative and interesting session.
Vandami Namasami Sramniji.
Bye.
Vandami Namasami Swamiji.
Thank you.
वंदाने एकाचन का क्या करो नवकाटी.
अच्छा, कल सुबह 9 तक एक करण एक युग से धारणा प्रमाणे त्याग. Yes. Now